In your playing days, which old linemen, old tackles, old guards, like gave you like, trouble, and which ones were you able to handle?
I don't think there's any question about it. I've been asked that question quite often, and I never hesitate. As far as the best offensive lineman that I've ever played against within our division, it's Dan Deerdorf.
Arizona Cardinals,
Yeah,
St. Louis
right.
Cardinals. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
To date you a little bit. You're right. It was previously the St. Louis Cardinals, and now the Arizona Cardinals. And this guy was one of the early big men into the league. He did not have a fault whatsoever. Big, agile, hostile, and mobile, as they say. And this guy, and the nicest guy you ever wanted to meet.
Yeah, seems like
before the game and after. The game.
right. He'll kind of butter you up and be like before the game, like, wait a minute, what?
But he was a great talent. I still have a great respect for him to this day, and it's been some 30 years since we've competed with one another. But after every game, he'd come over and shake your hand, and he'd say, George, good luck the rest of the way. Stay healthy. Take care of yourself. And that's sort of a sentiment that you wouldn't get when you played a Dallas Cowboy or something like that. So you have a great deal of respect for someone that kind of, and who was classy and who was a great competitor. And he'd really beat the snot out of you, but he would rub it in your face. So you appreciate things like that.
And what about the Hogs? The Hogs,
I mean, you talked about a guy, but this is a guy who we were very close talent-wise is George Stark, the offensive lineman who I played against so many years. George and I were very similar in ability, but because I played basketball at the University of Oregon, I had a little bit more dexterity than he had, and it was never a physical battle with George. It was always a battle of wits. he was a real smart Ivy League type of guy. I loved competing against him, and it was always a very evenly matched competition. And he's a guy who also came down to Washington, D.C. When we were on the journey and gave us support. And it was like reunited an old friend. Someone who I highly respect, and to this day we have a great relationship.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it's great.
And I wanted to ask you too, the NFL in general, of course, is multi-billion-dollar entity, and at that time the popularity was starting to really grow, like in the late 70s, early 80s. Now, like, what were the factors for the NFL to really flourish during that time? Like, what factors did you see that really made it happen?
I think there were a number of factors. I think that you have to give credit where credit is due. And Pete Rozelle, who you may or may not remember,
1960 to 89.
Yep. Exactly, but former commissioner of the NFL. I think his genius in constructing first of all, a great television package, even back then, I think was very much a contribution to our success. And secondly, even though we had some labor problems under his administration, I think when Paul Tagliabue came on, those labor issues, those work stoppages, cease and desist.
Absolutely.
And I think when we had that continuity, they began to build the brand, and that's important. Building the National Football League brand is something that is such an icon today in sports. They have done just a magnificent job, and even though there are people that fall through the cracks, they safeguard the integrity of the league, and that's one thing you have to tip your hat to them. And they put out a very competitive product every year, and that's the keys to their success. And it's just terribly popular here in the United States.
Yes, it's amazing. I'm like, more and more I see it. A gentleman that I feel should be in the Hall of Fame, Mr. George Young. And because I wanted to ask you about his philosophy in build, because he was the one that was able to draft all of these great players that we mentioned earlier, and also build that Super Bowl championship team. Talk about how Mr. Young, the late George Young, was as a GM and as a person.
I talked about things that really impacted primarily the locker room, and I didn't go upstairs, because if you go upstairs, I don't think you would want to stop at George Young, and although very deserving of being in the Hall of Fame and had a profound impact on the development and success of the Giants. I think his boss, the owner of the New York Giants, absolutely, you've got to mention his name, because he is the one who was the standard bearer. He's the one who set the standard and was unwavering in his absolute acceptance of those individuals who are not only good athletes, but you have to be a good person. Now, have there been exceptions to that? Yes, because nobody's perfect. But he's the one who's laid down the gauntlet and said, this is the standard bearer, which the New York Giants are going to be noted for in perpetuity. And fortunately, his son, John Mara, has picked up that banner as well.
Yes,
now, George Young, I will tell you this. at the pivotal moment in Giant history, when there was a rift between Wellington Mara and his nephew, it was actually George Young who came in and was the installed mediator, general
Right.
manager.
For Jack
Yeah,
and Wellington,
yeah.
right?
Well, Tim Mara was the nephew, and they had
I'm sorry.
a real bitter feud going on. And it was an internal feud, but it was tearing the team, it was splitting the team, and you could tell it had just negative consequences. But George Young was actually brought in by the league. He was assigned by the league to come in and sort of diffuse that and be the mediator between that. He's the one who brought in Bill Parcells. And the rest, as they say, is history, because George, yes, he was one who was primarily responsible, although not exclusively responsible for a lot of the drafts, because if you remember Bill Parcells' famous line that if you're going to allow me and force me to do all the cooking, at least I should be able to buy some
groceries.
so it wasn't just George Young, although George Young should be recognized as, I mean, he's been the GM of the year many, many years, and I think he's a quintessential general manager in the NFL, and the Giants owe an awful lot to him, and frankly, I'm shocked that he's not in the Hall of Fame, because he's very deserving of being in the Hall of Fame.